It started as just another busy night on The Tonight Show, until the man who had driven Jimmy home 100 times finally found the courage to say hello. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with energy as Jimmy Fallon wrapped up another successful episode. He had just finished interviewing a chart-topping musician and a Hollywood A-lister. The audience was still buzzing from the musical guest's performance, and Jimmy was feeling that familiar high that came from a night when everything clicked perfectly. As the cameras stopped rolling and the audience began to file out, Jimmy gathered his notes and prepared for his usual routine of saying goodnight to the crew before heading home. Outside in the parking structure beneath the studio, Miguel Santos sat in his silver Toyota Camry, the familiar blue and white Uber stickers on his windows catching the fluorescent light. At 45, Miguel had weathered face that told stories of long days and longer nights, kind eyes that had seen more than their share of heartbreak, and calloused hands that gripped the steering wheel with the practiced ease of someone who had driven these New York streets for the better part of 5 years. Miguel wasn't supposed to be there. His shift had officially ended an hour ago, but when the ride request had come through from Jimmy's assistant asking for a pickup at the studio, Miguel had immediately accepted it. He always did. Over the past 5 years, he had driven Jimmy Fallon home from the Tonight Show studio more times than he could count. Maybe 100 rides, maybe more. And in all that time, they had never really talked. Not because Jimmy wasn't friendly. Jimmy Fallon was exactly as warm and genuine as he appeared on television, always saying please and thank you, always asking Miguel how his night was going, always tipping generously through the app. But there was something about the dynamic, the celebrity in the back seat, the working man behind the wheel, that had always kept their conversations polite and surface level. Tonight felt different, though Miguel couldn't quite explain why. Maybe it was the guitar case propped up in his trunk, the one he hadn't opened in 3 years. Maybe it was the song that had been stuck in his head all week, a melody that reminded him of dreams he thought he had forgotten. Or maybe it was simply that after 5 years of driving past his old life every single night, something inside him had finally decided it was time to stop pretending he wasn't haunted by the music he used to make. Jimmy emerged from the studio building looking tired but satisfied, his hair slightly mussed from the long day of filming. He slid into the back seat of Miguel's car with his usual friendly greeting. "Hey, Miguel, how's your night going, man?" Jimmy always called him by name, always. Even after hundreds of rides, even when he was clearly exhausted from a long day of work, Jimmy Fallon never failed to greet his driver personally. It was one of the things that had earned Miguel's quiet respect over the years. "Good evening, Mr. Fallon," Miguel replied in his accented English, pulling away from the studio. "How was the show tonight?" "Really great, actually. We had this incredible musician on, and she just blew everyone away with her guitar work. Made me wish I was more musical, you know?" Miguel's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, he could see Jimmy scrolling through his phone, probably checking messages or social media responses to the night's show. It would be so easy to just drive in comfortable silence, complete the ride, collect his fare, and go home to his small apartment where his guitar waited in the closet like a reproachful ghost. But tonight, something made him speak. "You know, Mr. Fallon," Miguel said, his voice quiet but steady, "I used to be a musician." In the back seat, Jimmy looked up from his phone. "Really? That's amazing. What kind of music did you play?" Miguel could feel his heart racing. Why had he said that? In 5 years of driving, he had never shared anything personal with any of his passengers, let alone Jimmy Fallon. But the words were out there now, and something about Jimmy's genuine interest made him continue. "Folk music, mostly. Some rock. I had a band back in the day. Played around the city. Nothing big, but we had a few regular gigs." "That's so cool," Jimmy said, and Miguel could hear the authentic enthusiasm in his voice. Do you still play?" Miguel was quiet for a long moment, navigating the late-night traffic while wrestling with an answer to a question he hadn't honestly confronted in years. "Not really," he finally said. "Life gets complicated, you know? Family responsibilities, bills to pay. Music doesn't always pay those bills." Jimmy nodded, understanding more than Miguel realized. "I get that. I was really lucky that comedy worked out for me. But music? Man, music is special. It stays with you." They drove in comfortable silence for a few blocks, the familiar rhythm of tires on asphalt and the distant hum of the city at night. Miguel found himself taking a longer route than necessary, not quite ready for this conversation to end. "Mr. Fallon," Miguel said suddenly, surprising himself again with his boldness, "can I tell you something?" "Of course, man. What's on your mind?" Miguel pulled up to a red light and turned slightly in his seat so he could see Jimmy in the rearview mirror more clearly. "For 5 years I've been driving you home from the studio, 5 years, and every night I watch you come out of that building, and you're always, I don't know how to say it, you're always carrying this light with you, this energy, like you just spent the evening doing exactly what you were meant to do with your life." Jimmy was listening intently now, his phone forgotten in his lap. "And I thought you should know," Miguel continued, his voice growing stronger, "that watching you live your dream, even from the driver's seat, it's reminded me that dreams don't actually die, they just wait." The light turned green, but neither man seemed to notice immediately. Jimmy was staring at Miguel with an expression of surprise and something deeper, recognition, perhaps, of a connection that had been building without words for 5 years. "Miguel," Jimmy said softly, that's beautiful, man. Thank you for telling me that." Miguel drove the remaining few blocks to Jimmy's building in thoughtful silence. As they pulled up to the familiar address, Jimmy didn't immediately get out of the car. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. "Miguel, I have to ask, do you miss it? Playing music?" Miguel turned off the engine and sat quietly for a moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of honesty that surprised them both. "Every single day," he said simply. "Every single day." Jimmy was quiet for a long moment, and Miguel could see him thinking in the rearview mirror, working through something in his mind. "Listen," Jimmy said finally, "I know this might sound crazy, but would you be interested in coming by the studio sometime? Maybe bringing your guitar? I'd love to hear you play." Miguel's eyes widened. "Mr. Fallon, I couldn't. I haven't performed in front of anyone in 3 years. I'm just a driver now." "No," Jimmy said firmly, "you're not just anything. You're a musician who's been driving. There's a difference." Miguel turned around in his seat to face Jimmy directly. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. Look, I meet a lot of performers, and I can usually tell when someone has that thing, you know? That special connection to music. You've got it, Miguel. I can hear it in your voice when you talk about it." Miguel felt tears forming in his eyes, an emotional response he hadn't expected. For 5 years, he had convinced himself the chapter of his life was closed, that he was content being invisible, being the helpful driver who got important people where they needed to go. But Jimmy's invitation had cracked something open inside him. I have a guitar in my trunk," Miguel said quietly. Jimmy's eyes lit up. "You do?" "I've been carrying it around for weeks. I don't know why. I couldn't leave it at home anymore." Jimmy grinned, that infectious smile that had made him beloved by millions of viewers. "Miguel, this is meant to be. This conversation, this moment, your guitar in the trunk. This is the universe telling you it's time." Before Miguel could protest or talk himself out of it, Jimmy was out of the car and standing next to the trunk, waiting expectantly. Miguel got out slowly, his hands shaking slightly as he opened the trunk and pulled out a battered acoustic guitar case covered in old travel stickers from venues he had played decades ago. Here's what we're going to do, Jimmy said, his energy building as an idea formed in his mind. It's late. The studio's probably empty except for security. Why don't we go back? Right now. You can play for me. Just the two of us. No pressure, no audience. Just two guys sharing music. Miguel stared at Jimmy in disbelief. You want to go back to the studio? Now? Why not? I've got keys, you've got a guitar, and clearly we both have nowhere else we need to be right now. Miguel looked down at his guitar case, then back at Jimmy's earnest face. Something about the moment felt surreal, like a dream he might have had years ago, but had convinced himself was too impossible to ever come true. Okay, Miguel said quietly. Okay, let's do it. 20 minutes later, they were standing on the empty Tonight Show stage. The studio lights were dimmed to a soft glow, the audience seats were empty, and the familiar set that millions of people saw on television every night felt intimate and sacred in the quiet darkness. Miguel sat in the guest chair with his guitar in his lap, his fingers trembling slightly as he tuned the strings. It had been so long since he had played in front of anyone, and the weight of the moment was overwhelming. Take your time, Jimmy said gently, settling into his host chair. There's no rush. Miguel closed his eyes and let his fingers find their way across the fretboard, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed him. He began to play a song he had written 15 years ago, during the height of his performing days, about leaving home and chasing dreams in the big city. The melody filled the empty studio, echoing off the walls and wrapping around them like a warm embrace. Miguel's voice, rusty from disuse but still rich with emotion, began to carry the lyrics he thought he had forgotten. Left my hometown with a guitar and a prayer, thought the city streets would take me anywhere, but dreams don't always go the way you plan. Sometimes you end up being a different man. As Miguel sang, something magical happened. The years of doubt and compromise and practical decisions seemed to fall away, replaced by the pure joy of making music again. His voice grew stronger with each verse, his guitar work more confident, and by the time he reached the chorus, he was completely lost in the song. Jimmy watched in amazement, recognizing not just talent, but the kind of authentic connection to music that couldn't be taught or manufactured. This wasn't just someone who could play guitar and sing. This was someone who needed to make music the way other people needed to breathe. When the song ended, the studio was completely silent, except for the faint hum of electronic equipment. Miguel opened his eyes to find Jimmy staring at him, with tears streaming down his face. Miguel, Jimmy said softly, that was incredible. That was absolutely incredible. Miguel set his guitar aside, overwhelmed by the moment. It felt good, he said simply. It felt like remembering who I used to be. No, Jimmy corrected him. It felt like remembering who you are. Jimmy stood up and walked over to Miguel, extending his hand. I want to make you an offer, and before you say no, I want you to really think about it. Miguel shook Jimmy's hand, confused but intrigued. What kind of offer? Come on the show. As a musical guest, not next week, not next month, but when you're ready. When you've had time to prepare, to get comfortable performing again, I want to give you that platform. Miguel's mouth fell open. Mr. Fallon, I'm not a recording artist. I don't have an album or a record deal or... You don't need any of that, Jimmy interrupted. You need a song, a guitar, and the courage to share your gift with people who need to hear it. Everything else is just paperwork. Miguel was crying now, tears flowing freely as the magnitude of what Jimmy was offering began to sink in. But why? Miguel asked. Why would you do this for me? Jimmy smiled. That genuine warmth that had made him not just a successful entertainer, but a beloved figure to millions of people. Because for 5 years, you've driven me home from the place where I get to live my dream every single night. You've been kind, professional, reliable. You've taken care of me without asking for anything in return, but more than that, You've just shown me what real artistry looks like. You've reminded me why I fell in love with entertainment in the first place." Jimmy paused, gathering his thoughts. "And because I think there are probably a lot of people out there who gave up on their dreams for good reasons, practical reasons, family reasons, people who think it's too late, that their moment has passed. You could show them it's never too late. You could show them that dreams really do wait." Miguel was overwhelmed, unable to speak through his tears. The weight of possibility, of second chances, of dreams deferred but not destroyed, was almost too much to process. "Think about it," Jimmy said gently. "There's no pressure, no timeline. But if you decide you want to do this, if you want to share your music with the world, I'll be right there with you." They spent another hour in the studio talking about music, about dreams deferred and dreams renewed, about the strange paths that bring people together. Miguel played 2 more songs, each one feeling like a step back toward the person he had been before life convinced him to choose safety over passion. As they finally prepared to leave, Jimmy had one more surprise. "Miguel, I want you to keep that guitar out of the trunk." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want you to take it home tonight and play it. Tomorrow night, too. And the next night. I want you to remember what it feels like to make music again, because I have a feeling you're going to be doing a lot more of it very soon." 3 weeks later, Miguel Santos stepped onto the Tonight Show stage as a musical guest. He had spent those weeks practicing, writing new material, and slowly rebuilding the confidence that had been dormant for so many years. The song he performed was the same one he had played for Jimmy that first night, but it had evolved, grown deeper and more nuanced through repetition and refinement. But more than that, Miguel's story had evolved too. Jimmy had shared it during the interview portion of the show. The Uber driver, who had been quietly carrying his dreams in the trunk of his car for years, who had finally found the courage to dust off his guitar and remember who he really was. 6 months after that first midnight performance in an empty studio, Miguel released an album called Dreams Don't Die, They Wait. It was a collection of songs about second chances, about the dignity of work, about the dreams we carry with us, even when we think we've left them behind. The album's success surprised everyone except Jimmy, who had recognized something special that first night when a quiet Uber driver found the courage to share his story. Because sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the most important performances happen for an audience of one, in an empty studio in the middle of the night, when 2 strangers discover they were never strangers at all. Jimmy kept Miguel's original business card from that first ride, framed in his dressing room with a note, "Dreams don't die, they wait. Miguel Santos, musician and friend." It serves as a daily reminder that the most important connections we make aren't always the ones that happen in front of cameras, but the quiet moments when we take the time to really see each other, to honor each other's stories, and to believe in the dreams that people carry with them, even when they think those dreams have been forgotten. Because Miguel Santos wasn't just an Uber driver who happened to be a musician. He was a musician who had been driving while his dreams waited patiently for someone to believe in them again. And sometimes that someone is sitting in the back seat of your car, waiting for you to find the courage to say hello.